Question 1. The assessment process reveals you are approaching an intersection in Nova Scotia where you intend to make a left turn. An oncoming vehicle is approaching the intersection and appears to be proceeding straight. You are both at a point where you could enter the intersection. What is the safest and most legally compliant action to take? Option A. Proceed with your left turn, assuming the oncoming driver will see you and slow down. Option B. Yield to the oncoming vehicle and wait for it to pass before completing your left turn. Option C. Honk your horn to alert the oncoming driver to your intention to turn. Option D. Stop completely in the intersection to allow the oncoming vehicle to pass. The correct answer is B. Yield to the oncoming vehicle and wait for it to pass before completing your left turn. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for new drivers, understanding the nuances of right-of-way in complex intersections. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to apply learned rules to a dynamic, real-world situation where hesitation or misinterpretation can lead to dangerous outcomes. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety and adhere to Nova Scotia's specific traffic laws. The correct approach involves yielding to the oncoming vehicle that is already within the intersection or is closest to entering it, as per Nova Scotia's rules of the road regarding intersections and turning. This prioritizes the vehicle with the established right-of-way, preventing potential collisions. This is correct because Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act, specifically sections pertaining to right-of-way at intersections, dictates that drivers turning left must yield to oncoming traffic proceeding straight. This rule is designed to ensure predictable traffic flow and prevent accidents. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the left turn, assuming the oncoming driver will slow down. This fails to adhere to the fundamental principle of yielding the right-of-way to oncoming traffic when making a left turn, directly contravening Nova Scotia traffic law and creating a high risk of a collision. Another incorrect approach would be to stop completely in the intersection, blocking traffic. Seemingly cautious, this action can cause confusion and impede the flow of traffic, potentially leading to rear-end collisions or other hazards, and does not demonstrate an understanding of how to safely navigate the intersection according to the law. A further incorrect approach would be to honk the horn to signal the oncoming driver to stop. This is an inappropriate use of the horn and does not substitute for yielding the right-of-way. It is an aggressive action that can escalate a situation and does not align with safe driving practices or Nova Scotia's traffic regulations. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and adherence to the law. This involves 1. Identifying the immediate situation and potential hazards. 2. Recalling and applying the relevant traffic laws for that specific scenario, e.g., right-of-way at an intersection. 3. Making a decisive action that is both safe and legally compliant. 4. Continuously scanning for other potential hazards and adjusting as necessary. Question 2. Operational review demonstrates a driver in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, approaching a checkpoint and expressing significant distress, explaining they are late for a critical medical appointment and their vehicle's inspection sticker has expired by 1 day. They plead to be allowed to proceed, promising to get it fixed immediately after their appointment. What is the most appropriate course of action in this situation? Adhering strictly to Nova Scotia's traffic regulations. Option A. Suggest the driver attempt to find an alternative mode of transportation to their appointment while confiscating their keys until the inspection is completed. Option B. Advise the driver to remove their license plates and park the vehicle until they can obtain a valid inspection sticker, regardless of their appointment. Option C. Inform the driver that operating a vehicle with an expired inspection sticker is a violation of Nova Scotia law and they cannot proceed without a valid sticker, explaining the potential penalties. Option D. Allow the driver to proceed to their appointment with a verbal warning, trusting their promise to obtain a valid inspection sticker immediately afterward. The correct answer is C. Inform the driver that operating a vehicle with an expired inspection sticker is a violation of Nova Scotia law and they cannot proceed without a valid sticker, explaining the potential penalties. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a direct conflict between a driver's perceived urgency and the established legal requirements for vehicle operation in Nova Scotia. Drivers' personal circumstances, while understandable, do not override the mandatory provisions of the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. The challenge lies in balancing empathy with strict adherence to the law, ensuring public safety remains paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves informing the driver that they cannot operate the vehicle without a valid inspection sticker and explaining the legal consequences of doing so under Nova Scotia law. This aligns with the responsibility of any observer or authority figure to uphold traffic regulations designed for public safety. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act mandates that vehicles must be inspected and display a valid inspection sticker to be legally operated on public roads. Failure to comply can result in penalties, including fines, and the vehicle being impounded. Upholding this regulation is a core ethical and legal duty. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing the driver to proceed with the understanding that they will get the sticker later. This is a direct violation of the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. It creates a public safety risk by allowing an uninspected vehicle, which may have mechanical defects, onto the road. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the law and the safety of other road users. Another incorrect approach is to offer to look the other way or provide a false sense of leniency. This undermines the integrity of the inspection system and the enforcement of traffic laws in Nova Scotia. It is unprofessional and potentially illegal, as it could be construed as aiding in a violation of the Motor Vehicle Act. A further incorrect approach is to dismiss the driver's situation without offering any guidance on the correct procedure. While not directly violating the law, it fails to address the underlying issue and could lead the driver to make a poor decision out of desperation. Professional conduct often involves providing clear, lawful alternatives or explanations. Professional reasoning. Professionals encountering such situations should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety. This involves 1. Identifying the core legal requirement valid inspection sticker. 2. Assessing the immediate risk posed by noncompliance. 3. Clearly communicating the legal obligation and consequences to the individual. 4. Offering lawful alternatives or guidance on how to comply. 5. Maintaining professional integrity by not compromising on regulatory standards. Question 3. Cost-benefit analysis shows that driving independently offers the allure of freedom and convenience. However, for a new driver in Nova Scotia holding a learner's permit, what is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action when friends suggest driving alone to a nearby convenience store, assuring them they are a good driver and it's just a quick trip? Option A. Politely decline the invitation, explaining that the learner's permit requires a supervising licensed driver to be present at all times. Option B. Drive alone, as the trip is short and the driver feels confident in their abilities. Option C. Suggest that the driver can drive alone if they promise to be extra careful and stick to familiar roads. Option D. Allow the friend with the learner's permit to drive alone, as they are a good driver and the destination is close. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the invitation, explaining that the learner's permit requires a supervising licensed driver to be present at all times. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for new drivers in Nova Scotia, balancing the desire for independence with the practical and legal responsibilities of operating a vehicle. The professional challenge lies in making a decision that prioritizes safety and compliance with Nova Scotia's graduated licensing system, rather than succumbing to peer pressure or a premature sense of readiness. Careful judgment is required to understand the limitations and requirements imposed by the law to ensure public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves understanding and strictly adhering to the conditions of a Nova Scotia learner's permit. This means recognizing that driving is a privilege that comes with specific rules designed to build experience safely. The correct approach is to acknowledge the limitations of the learner's permit, which requires a supervising licensed driver to be present, and to decline the invitation to drive alone. This aligns directly with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which mandates supervision for learner's permit holders to ensure they gain experience under guidance and to reduce the risk of accidents. Ethically, it demonstrates responsibility and respect for the law and the safety of oneself and others. Incorrect approach is analysis. Driving alone without a supervising licensed driver, despite having a learner's permit, is a direct violation of the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. This action demonstrates a disregard for the law and the graduated licensing system, which is in place to protect novice drivers and the public. It also represents a failure to act ethically by putting oneself and others at unnecessary risk due to lack of experience and supervision. Allowing a friend with a learner's permit to drive alone, even if they claim to be a good driver, is also a serious regulatory and ethical failure. This not only violates the conditions of the learner's permit, but also makes the supervising driver, if they were present and allowed this, complicit in the illegal act. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the legal responsibilities associated with driving and a failure to prioritize safety. Suggesting that the learner's permit holder can drive if they are careful or only for a short distance implies a subjective interpretation of the law, which is not permissible. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act sets clear, objective requirements for learners' permits. Circumventing these rules based on personal judgment or perceived skill level is a dangerous and illegal practice. It shows a lack of respect for the established legal framework and a failure to uphold ethical driving standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must operate within the established legal and ethical frameworks. When faced with a situation that could lead to a violation, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant laws and regulations, in this case, the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its provisions for learners' permits. 2. Assessing the potential risks and consequences of each course of action, both legally and ethically. 3. Prioritizing compliance with the law and the safety of all involved. 4. Communicating clearly and assertively about adherence to rules, even when faced with social pressure. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a significant potential for a vehicle's brake lights to malfunction, leading to a serious rear-end collision risk on Nova Scotia's highways. You are driving a personal vehicle and notice that your brake lights are intermittently failing. What is the most responsible course of action to take immediately? Option A. Safely pull over to the side of the road at the earliest opportunity and contact the Nova Scotia RCMP or local police to report the malfunctioning brake lights and seek guidance on how to proceed. Option B. Warn other drivers behind you by flashing your headlights or honking your horn when you brake to alert them to the potential issue. Option C. Attempt to fix the brake light issue yourself by checking the bulbs and fuses, hoping to resolve it before it causes an accident. Option D. Continue driving cautiously, slowing down more than usual before braking, and hoping the intermittent nature of the problem doesn't lead to an incident. Correct answer is A. Safely pull over to the side of the road at the earliest opportunity and contact the Nova Scotia RCMP or local police to report the malfunctioning brake lights and seek guidance on how to proceed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a potential safety hazard with the procedural requirements for reporting and authorization. The driver's immediate concern for public safety is commendable, but bypassing established protocols can lead to unintended consequences, including potential liability and undermining the integrity of the reporting system. Careful judgment is required to ensure that safety is addressed effectively without compromising regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves immediately reporting the observed hazard to the appropriate authorities as per Nova Scotia's traffic regulations and the requirements for reporting vehicle defects. This means stopping in a safe location, if possible, and contacting the Nova Scotia RCMP or local police, or if the vehicle is a commercial vehicle, the Department of Public Works. This approach ensures that the hazard is officially documented and addressed by the designated authorities who have the mandate and resources to rectify the situation. It aligns with the ethical obligation to protect public safety while adhering to the legal framework governing roadworthiness and reporting. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to attempt to fix the issue oneself without proper authorization or expertise. This could lead to further damage to the vehicle, create a new hazard, or violate regulations regarding vehicle maintenance and repair. It bypasses the established reporting and inspection process, which is designed to ensure safety standards are met by qualified personnel. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the hazard and continue driving. This directly violates the driver's responsibility to ensure their vehicle is safe to operate and poses a significant risk to other road users. It is a clear breach of traffic laws and ethical conduct, prioritizing personal convenience over public safety. A further incorrect approach is to only inform other drivers verbally without official reporting. While well-intentioned, this is insufficient. It does not create an official record of the hazard, nor does it guarantee that the issue will be addressed by the responsible authorities. It relies on informal communication, which is unreliable and does not fulfill the driver's legal obligation to report safety concerns. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Assessing the immediate risk. Is the hazard dangerous enough to warrant immediate action? 2. Identifying the correct reporting procedure. What are the specific Nova Scotia regulations for reporting this type of hazard? 3. Taking appropriate action. This usually involves reporting to the designated authorities and, if safe to do so, ceasing operation of the vehicle until it is deemed safe. 4. Documenting the action taken, keeping a record of the report and any communication. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that while driving on a narrow residential street in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, you encounter a section with numerous parked cars on both sides and oncoming traffic approaching. What is the most appropriate and safest course of action to navigate this situation? Option A. Maintain a moderate speed and carefully maneuver between the parked cars and oncoming traffic, assuming other drivers will adjust. Option B. Reduce your speed to a crawl, position your vehicle to maximize visibility, and be prepared to stop if necessary, while carefully observing oncoming traffic and any potential hazards. Option C. Proceed at slightly reduced speed, assuming oncoming drivers will yield to allow you to pass through the narrow section first. Option D. Stop your vehicle completely and wait for all oncoming traffic to pass before proceeding, even if there is sufficient space to pass safely. Correct answer is B. Reduce your speed to a crawl, position your vehicle to maximize visibility, and be prepared to stop if necessary, while carefully observing oncoming traffic and any potential hazards. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that navigating a residential street with parked cars and oncoming traffic presents a common yet challenging scenario for new drivers in Nova Scotia. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to maintain forward momentum with ensuring the safety of oneself, other road users, and parked vehicles, all while adhering to the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations. Careful judgment is required to assess distances, speeds, and potential hazards accurately. The best approach involves a cautious and defensive driving strategy. This means significantly reducing speed to a crawl, making yourself visible to any pedestrians who might emerge from between parked cars, and being prepared to stop completely if necessary. You should also position your vehicle to maximize your view of oncoming traffic and any potential hazards. This approach is correct because it prioritizes safety above all else, directly aligning with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act's emphasis on safe driving practices and the duty of care owed to other road users. It demonstrates an understanding of the need for a greater margin of error in confined and potentially hazardous situations. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to maintain a moderate speed and weave between parked cars and oncoming traffic. This fails to acknowledge the increased risk of collision with parked vehicles or oncoming traffic, contravening the fundamental principles of safe driving and the duty to avoid creating hazards. Another incorrect approach would be to stop the vehicle completely and wait for the oncoming traffic to pass, even if there is ample space. While seemingly safe, this can impede traffic flow unnecessarily and may not be the most efficient or practical response, potentially causing frustration and unsafe overtaking maneuvers by following vehicles. Furthermore, it doesn't demonstrate the driver's ability to safely navigate such situations with appropriate speed reduction and awareness. A third incorrect approach would be to assume oncoming drivers will yield and proceed without significantly reducing speed. This is a dangerous assumption that disregards the shared responsibility of road safety and the potential for misjudgment by other drivers, directly violating the duty to drive defensively. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that begins with hazard identification and risk assessment. In this scenario, the hazards are parked cars and oncoming traffic. The risk is a collision. The next step is to select the safest course of action that minimizes risk while adhering to traffic laws. This involves applying defensive driving principles, such as reducing speed, increasing observation, and being prepared to react. Finally, the driver should execute the chosen action smoothly and safely, continuously reassessing the situation. Question 6. Analysis of a situation where an individual applying for Nova Scotia driver's license presents a foreign passport and a utility bill addressed to a previous tenant at their current address, and states they have no other forms of identification or proof of residency. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Nova Scotia Registry of Motor Vehicles official? Option A. Immediately deny the application and inform the applicant they cannot proceed without the correct documents, offering no further assistance. Option B. Issue the driver's license based on the applicant's statement, assuming they are a resident and their identity is confirmed by the foreign passport. Option C. Explain the specific documentation required by Nova Scotia law for proof of identity and residency, and advise the applicant on how to obtain acceptable documents, such as a Nova Scotia health card, a lease agreement, or a bank statement in their name at the current address. Option D. Advise the applicant to obtain a letter from their landlord confirming their residency, even if the landlord is not a registered entity in Nova Scotia. The correct answer is C. Explain the specific documentation required by Nova Scotia law for proof of identity and residency, and advise the applicant on how to obtain acceptable documents, such as a Nova Scotia health card, a lease agreement, or a bank statement in their name at the current address. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a driver's desire to obtain a Nova Scotia driver's license and the legal requirements for proving identity and residency. The challenge lies in navigating the specific documentation requirements mandated by Nova Scotia's motor vehicle legislation while respecting the applicant's circumstances. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the law without being unduly rigid or discriminatory. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly explaining the Nova Scotia Registry of Motor Vehicles requirements for proof of identity and residency, and guiding the applicant on how to obtain the necessary documentation. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations, which clearly outline the acceptable forms of identification and proof of residency. By providing clear, actionable guidance, the registrar upholds the legal framework while assisting the applicant in meeting the requirements. This demonstrates a commitment to both regulatory compliance and customer service within the bounds of the law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the applicant's word without verifying the required documentation. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the legal mandate for specific proof, potentially leading to fraudulent licensing and undermining the integrity of the licensing system. It fails to comply with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act's evidentiary standards. Another incorrect approach is to immediately deny the application without offering any assistance or explanation of the required documents. This is professionally problematic as it lacks the expected level of service and guidance. While the applicant may not currently meet the requirements, a professional registrar should inform them of what is needed to succeed, rather than simply rejecting them without recourse. This approach, while not directly violating the Act, falls short of professional conduct expectations. A third incorrect approach is to suggest the applicant obtain documents that are not recognized by Nova Scotia's Registry of Motor Vehicles. This is professionally unacceptable as it misleads the applicant and wastes their time and effort. It demonstrates a lack of knowledge of the specific regulatory requirements and can lead to frustration and distrust. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, fairness, and effective communication. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements of the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations regarding licensing. 2. Clearly communicating these requirements to the applicant in an understandable manner. 3. Providing guidance on how to obtain the necessary documentation within the scope of permissible assistance. 4. Making a final decision based strictly on whether the applicant meets the documented requirements, ensuring impartiality and adherence to the law. Question 7. The review process indicates that a driver observed at Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Inspection Station is exhibiting erratic speech patterns, unsteady gait, and a strong odor of alcohol. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure public safety while adhering to Nova Scotia's regulatory framework? Option A. Disregard the observations, assuming the driver is merely having an off day and it is not your responsibility to intervene. Option B. Make a personal determination that the driver is unsafe and discreetly disable their vehicle to prevent them from driving. Option C. Document all observed behaviors and physical indicators in detail and formally report these observations to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles in Nova Scotia. Option D. Directly inform the driver that they are unfit to drive and instruct them to surrender their vehicle keys immediately. Correct answer is C. Document all observed behaviors and physical indicators in detail, and formally report these observations to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles in Nova Scotia. Explanation: the review process indicates a scenario where a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely is in question due to observable changes in their behavior and physical presentation. This is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the individual's right to privacy and autonomy with the paramount public safety interest. A driver's license is a privilege, and its continued possession is contingent on meeting the safety standards set by Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act. The challenge lies in making an objective assessment based on observed behavior without succumbing to personal bias or speculation, and acting decisively to protect the public while respecting the individual's rights. The best approach involves a structured, objective assessment and reporting process. This means meticulously documenting all observed behaviors and physical indicators that raise concerns about the driver's fitness to operate a vehicle. This documentation should then be formally submitted to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles in Nova Scotia, as mandated by the province's regulatory framework. This process ensures that the decision-making authority, which is the registrar, has the necessary information to conduct a thorough review, which may include requiring a medical examination or other assessments. This aligns with the principles of due process and ensures that actions taken are based on evidence and regulatory requirements, prioritizing public safety as the ultimate goal. An approach that involves directly confronting the individual and demanding they surrender their license is incorrect. This bypasses the established regulatory channels and could lead to an escalation of the situation, potentially compromising safety further. It also infringes on the individual's rights by assuming guilt and imposing a penalty without due process. Another incorrect approach is to simply ignore the observations, believing it is not one's responsibility to report. This is a failure to uphold the ethical and legal obligation to report potential safety risks on public roadways, directly contravening the spirit and letter of road safety legislation in Nova Scotia. Finally, making a personal judgment about the driver's fitness and immediately revoking their perceived access to a vehicle without official intervention is an overreach of authority and a violation of established procedures. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective observation, adherence to established reporting protocols, and a commitment to public safety. This involves understanding the relevant legislation, Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act, recognizing the limits of one's own authority, and utilizing the designated channels for reporting safety concerns. The process should be one of information gathering and formal referral, allowing the appropriate authorities to conduct a comprehensive evaluation. Question 8. Performance analysis shows that a driver operating a vehicle on Highway 103 in Nova Scotia experiences a sudden and unexpected malfunction with their GPS navigation system, which begins providing erratic and potentially dangerous directions. The driver is concerned about the immediate safety implications of these incorrect directions. What is the most responsible course of action for the driver to take? Option A. Attempt to adjust the GPS settings while continuing to drive at a reduced speed to minimize disruption. Option B. Immediately pull over to a safe location off the traveled portion of the roadway and stop the vehicle completely before addressing the GPS issue. Option C. Pull over to the shoulder of the highway and make the GPS adjustment without fully disengaging from the driving task. Option D. Continue driving to the nearest planned destination without stopping, assuming the GPS will eventually correct itself. The correct answer is B. Immediately pull over to a safe location off the traveled portion of the roadway and stop the vehicle completely before addressing the GPS issue. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the overarching responsibility of road safety and adherence to Nova Scotia's traffic laws. The temptation to prioritize convenience or a perceived minor inconvenience over safety protocols is a common pitfall. Careful judgment is required to assess the actual risk posed by the situation and to act in a manner that is both legally compliant and ethically sound, ensuring the safety of oneself and others on the road. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately pulling over to a safe location off the traveled portion of the roadway and stopping the vehicle completely before addressing the issue. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which mandates that drivers must operate their vehicles in a safe manner and avoid creating hazards. Stopping the vehicle ensures that the driver's full attention can be dedicated to resolving the issue without compromising control of the vehicle or endangering other road users. This proactive measure prevents potential accidents that could arise from attempting to manage a distraction or a minor mechanical issue while in motion. Incorrect approach is analysis. Attempting to adjust the GPS while the vehicle is still in motion, even at a slow speed, is an incorrect approach. This action constitutes distracted driving, which is a serious offense under the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. It significantly impairs a driver's ability to perceive and react to changing road conditions, traffic signals, and other vehicles, thereby creating an unacceptable risk of collision. Continuing to drive to the nearest destination without stopping to address the GPS issue is also an incorrect approach. The intention might be to minimize disruption. It disregards the potential for the GPS to provide incorrect or dangerous directions, leading the driver into hazardous situations. Furthermore, it demonstrates a failure to prioritize immediate safety over convenience, which is a core ethical responsibility of any driver. Pulling over to the shoulder of the highway and making the adjustment without fully disengaging from the driving task is an incorrect approach. While it involves stopping, the shoulder of a highway is often a dangerous place due to passing traffic. If the adjustment requires significant focus, the driver may still be mentally disengaged from monitoring their surroundings, and the proximity of fast-moving vehicles poses a significant risk of being struck. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance above all else. When faced with a situation that could compromise either, the immediate and safest course of action is to cease the operation of the vehicle until the issue is resolved. This involves a risk assessment where the potential consequences of continuing to drive are weighed against the temporary inconvenience of stopping. The guiding principle should always be to prevent harm and uphold the law, even if it means a slight delay. Question 9. Compliance review shows a driver approaching an intersection in Nova Scotia during heavy fog, significantly reducing visibility. The driver can see approximately 15 meters ahead. They hear no approaching vehicles and see no immediate pedestrian activity. What is the most responsible course of action to take? Option A. Wait until visibility improves to a point where the driver can clearly see all potential hazards in the intersection and beyond. Option B. Enter the intersection slowly, assuming other drivers will be cautious due to the fog. Option C. Proceed cautiously into the intersection, slowing down and honking the horn intermittently. Option D. Stop just before the intersection and wait for a brief period, then proceed if no immediate threats are perceived. The correct answer is A. Wait until visibility improves to a point where the driver can clearly see all potential hazards in the intersection and beyond. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to make a judgment call in a dynamic and potentially hazardous situation, balancing the immediate need to proceed with the overarching responsibility to ensure public safety and adhere to traffic laws in Nova Scotia. The driver must assess the risk of proceeding versus waiting, considering factors beyond their immediate line of sight. This requires a proactive approach to risk management, anticipating potential hazards rather than reacting to them. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves prioritizing safety and adherence to traffic regulations by waiting for a clear and unobstructed view of the intersection before proceeding. This aligns with the fundamental principles of safe driving and the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which mandates drivers to ensure the way is clear before entering an intersection, especially when visibility is compromised. This approach demonstrates a commitment to risk assessment by acknowledging the potential for unseen hazards and choosing the most cautious course of action to prevent accidents and protect oneself and others. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding cautiously while partially entering the intersection, despite limited visibility, is an unacceptable approach. This action violates the principle of ensuring the way is clear and significantly increases the risk of collision with oncoming traffic or pedestrians that may not be visible. It demonstrates a failure in risk assessment by underestimating the potential dangers of impaired visibility. Another unacceptable approach is to assume that other drivers will yield or that the intersection is clear based on a lack of immediate sound or movement. This is a dangerous assumption that disregards the unpredictable nature of traffic and the potential for sudden appearances of other road users. It represents a passive and reactive approach to risk, rather than a proactive one. Finally, honking the horn repeatedly to alert unseen traffic before proceeding is not a substitute for ensuring the intersection is clear. While signaling intent can be useful, it does not absolve the driver of the responsibility to visually confirm safety. This approach attempts to mitigate risk through auditory cues rather than direct visual confirmation, which is insufficient for safe intersection navigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes proactive risk identification and mitigation. This involves a systematic evaluation of the environment, considering potential hazards even when they are not immediately apparent. The driver should ask, "What are the potential risks if I proceed now? And what information do I need to gather to make a safe decision?" The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act provides the legal framework, but professional judgment requires going beyond mere compliance to actively prevent foreseeable harm. This means erring on the side of caution when uncertainty exists, particularly in situations with reduced visibility. Question 10. Investigation of safe driving practices in Nova Scotia reveals that maintaining an appropriate following distance is paramount. If a driver is traveling at a constant speed of 72 km/h on a clear, dry highway, what is the minimum safe following distance in meters, assuming the driver adheres to the standard 2-second rule and then adds an additional second for increased caution? Option A, approximately 30 meters. Option B, approximately 45 meters. Option C, approximately 15 meters. Option D, approximately 60 meters. The correct answer is D, approximately 60 meters. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to not only understand the fundamental principles of safe driving, but also to apply mathematical reasoning to a practical driving situation. The Nova Scotia Driver's Handbook, while focusing on rules and safety, implicitly requires an understanding of spatial relationships and distances, which can be quantified. The challenge lies in translating abstract rules into concrete calculation that directly impact safe operation of a vehicle. A driver's ability to accurately estimate distances and speeds is crucial for maintaining safe following distances, executing safe lane changes, and navigating intersections, all of which are assessed in the Nova Scotia driver's examination. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves calculating the minimum safe following distance based on the vehicle's speed, using the 2-second rule as a baseline, and adjusting for conditions. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of defensive driving taught in Nova Scotia, emphasizing maintaining adequate space to react to hazards. The 2-second rule, often cited in driver education materials, provides a quantifiable measure of safe following distance. For example, if a driver is traveling at 80 km/h, the 2-second rule translates to a distance of approximately 4 meters. This calculation demonstrates an understanding of how speed impacts the distance needed to stop safely, a core tenet of road safety regulations in Nova Scotia. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply state a fixed following distance regardless of speed. This fails to account for the fundamental physics of braking. Stopping distances increase exponentially with speed. A fixed distance, such as 10 meters, would be dangerously insufficient at higher speeds and unnecessarily cautious at very low speeds, demonstrating a lack of understanding of the relationship between speed and safe following distance as required by Nova Scotia's safe driving standards. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on visual cues without any mathematical estimation. Visual cues are important. They must be grounded in a quantitative understanding of safe distances. Guessing a following distance based on how far away the car in front looks can be highly subjective and prone to error, especially in varying weather or light conditions, which is not a robust method for ensuring safety as mandated by the Nova Scotia driver's examination. A third incorrect approach is to calculate the distance based on a time interval that is too short, such as 1 second. While this might seem like it provides more room, it drastically underestimates the time required for perception, reaction, and braking. A 1-second gap at 80 km/h is only about 2 meters, which is insufficient to avoid a collision if the vehicle ahead stops suddenly, violating the core safety principles expected of Nova Scotia drivers. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such questions by first identifying the core safety principle being tested, safe following distance. Then they should recall or derive the relevant quantitative rule, the 2-second rule. The next step is to perform the calculation accurately, demonstrating an understanding of the relationship between speed and distance. Finally, they should be able to articulate why this calculated distance is safe, referencing the underlying physics and regulatory expectations for safe driving in Nova Scotia. This systematic approach ensures that the answer is not only mathematically correct, but also ethically and regulatorily sound. Question 11. Comparative studies suggest that drivers in Nova Scotia, when faced with a sudden and concerning mechanical issue such as smoke emanating from their vehicle's engine while driving on Highway 102, often grapple with the decision of how to proceed. Considering the potential for immediate danger and the legal obligations under Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act, which of the following represents the most responsible and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Attempt to diagnose and fix the issue on the shoulder of the highway, as it might be a simple fix that can be resolved quickly. Option B. Immediately pull over to a safe location off the traveled portion of the roadway and assess the situation, ceasing operation if the smoke indicates a significant mechanical problem that compromises safety. Option C. Continue driving at a reduced speed to the nearest service station, assuming the smoke is minor and will not cause immediate harm. Option D. Ignore the smoke and focus on reaching the destination, hoping the problem will resolve itself. Correct answer is B. Immediately pull over to a safe location off the traveled portion of the roadway and assess the situation, ceasing operation if the smoke indicates a significant mechanical problem that compromises safety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the overarching legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle in Nova Scotia. The temptation to prioritize convenience or perceived minor infractions over established procedures can lead to significant risks for the driver and others. Careful judgment is required to assess the severity of the situation and choose the most responsible course of action, adhering strictly to Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act and associated regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately pulling over to a safe location off the traveled portion of the roadway and assessing the situation. If the vehicle is exhibiting a clear mechanical issue that could compromise safety, e.g., smoke, unusual noises, loss of braking ability, the driver must cease operation and arrange for appropriate assistance. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety and compliance with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which mandates that drivers operate vehicles in a safe condition and take reasonable steps to prevent hazards. It aligns with the ethical responsibility of all road users to protect themselves and others. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to stop and continuing to drive, even at a reduced speed, when experiencing a significant mechanical issue like smoke emanating from the engine compartment, is a direct violation of the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. This action creates an immediate hazard for other road users and demonstrates a disregard for public safety. It is ethically unacceptable as it places others at risk due to the driver's negligence. Attempting to diagnose and repair a potentially serious mechanical issue on the shoulder of a busy highway without proper safety precautions or expertise is also an unacceptable approach. This action not only poses a risk to the driver attempting the repair, but also to passing motorists if the vehicle is obstructing traffic or if the repair process itself creates a hazard. It fails to acknowledge the limitations of a layperson's ability to safely address mechanical failures and bypasses the requirement to ensure the vehicle is in a safe operating condition before continuing its journey. Ignoring the issue and hoping it resolves itself while continuing to drive is a negligent act. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act places a responsibility on drivers to ensure their vehicle is roadworthy. Ignoring a visible and audible mechanical problem, such as smoke, is a failure to meet this responsibility and significantly increases the risk of a more severe breakdown, accident, or fire, endangering the driver and others. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk assessment framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This involves 1. Immediate hazard identification, recognizing potential dangers presented by the vehicle's condition. 2. Safety first, prioritizing the immediate cessation of operation if safety is compromised. 3. Legal compliance, understanding and adhering to the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act regarding vehicle condition and safe operation. 4. Responsible action, taking appropriate steps to mitigate risk, which may include stopping, seeking professional assistance, and ensuring the vehicle is safe before resuming travel. Question 12. The investigation demonstrates that a driver applicant in Nova Scotia has accumulated several minor traffic violations over the past 3 years and recently received notification of a critical safety recall on the vehicle he intends to use for his road test, which he claims he never received. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for the Nova Scotia Registry of Motor Vehicles examiner to adopt? Option A. Proceed with the road test without addressing the vehicle recall, assuming it is a separate issue from the applicant's driving competency. Option B. Automatically deny the road test application due to the accumulation of minor traffic violations, regardless of their nature or recency. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's driving record and the details of the vehicle recall. Engage with the applicant to understand his awareness and actions regarding the recall, and assess his overall fitness to drive based on this complete information. Option D. Rely solely on the applicant's statement that he did not receive the recall notice and disregard the potential safety implications of the recalled vehicle. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's driving record and the details of the vehicle recall. Engage with the applicant to understand his awareness and actions regarding the recall, and assess his overall fitness to drive based on this complete information. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a driver applicant, Mr. Henderson, has a history of minor traffic violations and a recent incident involving a vehicle recall that he was unaware of. This presents a professional challenge for the Nova Scotia Registry of Motor Vehicles examiner because it requires balancing the need to ensure public safety on Nova Scotia roads with the applicant's right to obtain a driver's license. The examiner must assess the applicant's current fitness to drive, considering both past behavior and potential undisclosed risks, without being overly punitive or dismissive of the applicant's circumstances. Careful judgment is required to determine if the applicant poses an unacceptable risk to themselves or others. The best approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment that considers all available information. This includes reviewing Mr. Henderson's driving record, understanding the nature and recency of his violations, and investigating the specifics of the vehicle recall. The examiner should then engage with Mr. Henderson to ascertain his awareness of the recall, his understanding of its implications, and any steps he has taken or plans to take to address it. This approach aligns with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which mandates that licenses be issued to individuals who meet the required standards of competence and safety. It also reflects the ethical obligation to make decisions based on objective evidence and a fair evaluation of risk, rather than on assumptions or incomplete information. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the license based solely on the number of past violations, without considering their severity or context. This fails to acknowledge that minor violations do not always equate to a current inability to drive safely and may not reflect a significant risk. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the vehicle recall entirely, assuming it is irrelevant to the applicant's driving ability. This is a failure to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, as a recalled vehicle can pose a direct safety hazard. Finally, an approach that relies on hearsay or unsubstantiated concerns without direct investigation would also be professionally unacceptable, as it deviates from evidence-based decision-making. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic review of all relevant data, including driving history, incident reports, and direct communication with the applicant. This framework should involve identifying potential risks, gathering information to mitigate or confirm those risks, and making a decision that is both legally compliant and ethically sound, always with the paramount goal of public safety in Nova Scotia. Question 13. Assessment of a driver's condition in Nova Scotia. A driver traveling on Highway 102 in Nova Scotia begins to feel extremely drowsy and notices their eyelids are heavy, making it difficult to keep them open. They are still a considerable distance from their intended destination. Considering the principles of safe driving and Nova Scotia's traffic regulations, What is the most responsible course of action to take? Option A. Pull over to a safe location immediately and rest until fully alert. Option B. Drive on and only pull over when feeling on the verge of falling asleep. Option C. Continue driving but try to stay awake by turning up the radio and opening the windows. Option D. Speed up to reach the destination faster before fatigue becomes unmanageable. The correct answer is A. Pull over to a safe location immediately and rest until fully alert. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle in Nova Scotia. The driver's fatigue is a significant risk factor, and their desire to reach their destination quickly conflicts with the paramount importance of road safety and adherence to Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety over personal convenience. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves recognizing the immediate safety risk posed by fatigue and taking appropriate action to mitigate it. This means pulling over to a safe location and resting until the driver is no longer impaired by fatigue. This aligns with the fundamental principles of safe driving and the implicit duty of care owed to other road users, as well as the explicit provisions within Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act that prohibit operating a vehicle while impaired by any condition that affects one's ability to drive safely, including fatigue. This proactive measure prevents potential accidents and ensures compliance with the spirit and letter of traffic laws. Incorrect approach is analysis. Continuing to drive despite feeling significantly fatigued is a direct violation of safe driving practices and the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. This approach disregards the increased risk of impaired judgment, slower reaction times, and potential microsleeps, all of which can lead to serious accidents. It prioritizes personal convenience over public safety and legal compliance. Attempting to push through the fatigue by engaging in distracting activities like loud music or opening windows is an inadequate and dangerous attempt to mask the underlying impairment. These methods do not address the physiological need for rest and can create a false sense of alertness, while the driver's ability to operate the vehicle remains compromised. This approach fails to meet the standard of care expected of a responsible driver in Nova Scotia. Pulling over only when feeling on the verge of falling asleep is a reactive and extremely risky approach. It implies that the driver is willing to operate the vehicle until the point of imminent danger, rather than proactively managing their fatigue. This significantly increases the likelihood of an incident occurring before they can safely stop, thereby endangering themselves and others. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must prioritize safety and legal compliance. When faced with a situation that compromises their ability to perform their duties safely, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the risk fatigue. 2. Assessing the severity of the risk significant impairment. 3. Consulting relevant regulations and ethical guidelines. Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act duty of care. 4. Choosing the safest and most compliant course of action. Rest. 5. Implementing the chosen action immediately. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that a used vehicle dealership in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, has a policy of only disclosing vehicle history issues if they are explicitly listed on a standardized disclosure form provided by the Nova Scotia Registry of Motor Vehicles. During a recent audit, it was noted that a vehicle with a history of significant frame damage, which was known to the dealership but not explicitly detailed on the standard form, was sold without this information being conveyed to the buyer. Considering the regulatory framework in Nova Scotia, which approach best reflects professional and legal obligations when selling used vehicles? Option A. Disclose only those vehicle history issues that the buyer specifically asks about during the negotiation process. Option B. Proactively disclose all known material defects and significant past damage to a vehicle, even if not explicitly listed on a standardized disclosure form, to ensure the buyer is fully informed. Option C. Assume that if a defect was not identified during a standard pre-sale inspection, it does not need to be disclosed to the buyer. Option D. Rely strictly on the standardized disclosure form provided by the Nova Scotia Registry of Motor Vehicles, disclosing only what is explicitly required on that document. The correct answer is B. Proactively disclose all known material defects and significant past damage to a vehicle, even if not explicitly listed on a standardized disclosure form, to ensure the buyer is fully informed. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the dealership's adherence to Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations concerning the disclosure of vehicle history. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the dealership's business interests with the legal and ethical obligations to consumers. Misinterpreting or circumventing disclosure requirements can lead to significant legal repercussions, including fines, license suspension, and damage to the dealership's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure all mandatory disclosures are made accurately and transparently. The best professional practice involves proactively identifying and disclosing all known material defects or significant past damage to a vehicle, even if not explicitly mandated by a specific written disclosure form for every minor issue. This approach aligns with the spirit of consumer protection laws in Nova Scotia, which aim to ensure buyers are making informed purchasing decisions. The Motor Vehicle Act, while not requiring a specific form for every conceivable issue, implies a duty of care to disclose information that a reasonable buyer would consider important. This proactive disclosure builds trust and mitigates future disputes. Failing to disclose known material defects, even if not explicitly listed on a standard form, constitutes a breach of consumer protection principles and potentially the Motor Vehicle Act's implied duty of good faith in transaction. This approach risks misleading the buyer into believing the vehicle is in better condition than it is. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the absence of a specific written requirement for a particular defect. This is a narrow interpretation of legal obligations and ignores the broader ethical responsibility to provide a complete and accurate representation of the vehicle's condition. This can lead to accusations of misrepresentation. A third incorrect approach is to assume that if a defect was not discovered during a standard inspection, it does not need to be disclosed. This overlooks the dealership's responsibility to conduct reasonable due diligence and to disclose any material information they are aware of, regardless of whether it was flagged by a routine inspection. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency and consumer welfare. This involves 1. Understanding the full scope of disclosure obligations under the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and related consumer protection legislation. 2. Conducting thorough vehicle inspections and diligently investigating any reported issues or known history. 3. Adopting a when in doubt, disclose mentality for any information that a reasonable buyer would find material to their purchasing decision. 4. Documenting all disclosures made to the buyer. Question 15. Regulatory review indicates that following a recent medical event in Nova Scotia that may have affected your physical or cognitive abilities, what is the most responsible course of action regarding your ability to operate a motor vehicle? Option A. Resume driving as soon as you feel capable, assuming the medical event was minor and has no lasting impact on your driving skills. Option B. Consult with a medical professional to assess your fitness to drive and follow their guidance regarding any necessary reporting to the Nova Scotia Registrar of Motor Vehicles. Option C. Discuss your concerns with friends and family to gauge their opinions on your driving ability, but do not seek formal medical assessment or reporting. Option D. Wait for the Nova Scotia Registrar of Motor Vehicles to contact you if they have concerns about your driving fitness. The correct answer is B. Consult with a medical professional to assess your fitness to drive and follow their guidance regarding any necessary reporting to the Nova Scotia Registrar of Motor Vehicles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in Nova Scotia who has recently experienced a medical event that could impair their driving ability. The core difficulty lies in balancing personal autonomy and the desire to resume normal activities with the paramount responsibility to public safety. A driver's obligation extends beyond their own well-being to that of all other road users. Careful judgment is required to accurately assess the risk posed by their condition and to comply with legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice in this situation is to proactively consult with a medical professional to determine fitness to drive and to follow their guidance regarding any necessary reporting to the Nova Scotia Registrar of Motor Vehicles. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety by ensuring that any driving restrictions or requirements are identified and addressed through the proper channels. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act mandates that individuals must be medically fit to operate a motor vehicle. Furthermore, ethical considerations for all licensed drivers in Nova Scotia dictate a responsibility to ensure their driving does not endanger others. Seeking medical advice and adhering to its recommendations, including any reporting obligations, directly fulfills these legal and ethical duties. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to resume driving immediately without consulting a doctor, assuming the condition was temporary and has fully resolved. This fails to acknowledge the potential for residual impairment and directly violates the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act's requirement for medical fitness to drive. It also disregards the ethical obligation to protect other road users from potential harm caused by an unsafe driver. Another incorrect approach is to only inform close friends or family about the medical event and their concerns about driving, but not to seek professional medical assessment or report to the authorities if required. While seeking support is positive, it does not fulfill the legal requirement to be medically fit to drive and to potentially report to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles if the condition is reportable. This approach neglects the formal mechanisms in place to ensure road safety. A third incorrect approach is to wait for the Registrar of Motor Vehicles to contact them if they suspect a problem, rather than taking proactive steps. This passive stance abdicates personal responsibility. The onus is on the driver to ensure they meet the medical standards for driving in Nova Scotia. Waiting for external intervention is a failure to uphold their duty of care and could lead to dangerous situations on the road. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Nova Scotia, when faced with a medical condition that might affect their driving, should employ a decision-making framework that begins with self-assessment of potential risks. This should immediately trigger a consultation with a qualified medical practitioner. The driver must then actively inquire about any reporting obligations to the Nova Scotia Registrar of Motor Vehicles based on the medical advice received. Transparency with medical professionals and adherence to their recommendations, including any necessary notifications to the authorities, are critical steps in ensuring both personal compliance and public safety. Question 16. Consider a scenario where a Nova Scotia Sheriff's Department officer observes a vehicle weaving significantly within its lane and then crossing the center line briefly before correcting. The driver appears to be fumbling with something on the passenger seat. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the officer? Option A. Approach the vehicle on foot at a traffic light to ask the driver if they are experiencing any difficulties. Option B. Stop the vehicle and issue a citation for a minor equipment violation observed on the vehicle's taillight. Option C. Continue on patrol as the vehicle eventually corrected its course and no immediate collision occurred. Option D. Initiate a lawful traffic stop to investigate the observed driving behavior and potential impairment. The correct answer is D. Initiate a lawful traffic stop to investigate the observed driving behavior and potential impairment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a driver exhibiting signs of impairment, which directly impacts public safety on Nova Scotia roads. The driver's behavior is not a clear-cut violation, but suggests a potential risk that requires immediate and appropriate action. The challenge lies in balancing the need to ensure road safety with the driver's rights and the proper procedures for handling suspected impairment. Careful judgment is required to assess the situation accurately and respond effectively without overstepping authority or failing to act when necessary. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves observing the driver's behavior, noting specific indicators of potential impairment, and then initiating a lawful traffic stop to investigate further. This approach aligns with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which provides law enforcement officers with the authority to stop vehicles when they have reasonable grounds to suspect an offense has been committed, including impaired driving. The officer's duty is to protect the public, and a traffic stop is the necessary precursor to conducting standardized field sobriety tests or other investigative measures to determine if impairment is present. This methodical approach ensures that any subsequent actions are legally justified and based on observable evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to stop the vehicle and continuing on patrol, despite observing erratic driving and signs of impairment, constitutes a failure to uphold the officer's duty to protect public safety. This inaction could lead to a serious accident and is a dereliction of professional responsibility under Nova Scotia law, which mandates officers to intervene when they have reasonable grounds to suspect an offense. Immediately issuing a ticket for a minor infraction, such as a lane change violation, without addressing the more serious suspected impairment, is inappropriate. While a minor infraction might be present, prioritizing it over a potential impaired driving offense is a misapplication of resources and a failure to address the primary safety concern. This approach does not fulfill the officer's obligation to investigate suspected impaired driving. Approaching the driver outside of a lawful traffic stop to question them about their driving, without any initial investigative action, is procedurally unsound and could compromise the integrity of any subsequent investigation. It bypasses the established legal framework for investigating suspected impaired driving, potentially rendering any gathered information inadmissible, and failing to establish the necessary grounds for further action. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a systematic decision-making process when encountering situations that suggest potential violations of the law, particularly those impacting public safety. This process begins with observation and assessment of the situation, followed by the application of relevant legal statutes and departmental policies. When reasonable grounds exist to suspect an offense, the next step is to initiate lawful investigative procedures. Documentation of all observations and actions is crucial for accountability and legal proceedings. In cases of suspected impaired driving, the priority is always public safety, and actions taken must be consistent with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and establish police procedures. Question 17. Upon reviewing the driving performance of an applicant during their Nova Scotia driver's license road test, an examiner observes that the applicant is struggling with parallel parking. The applicant expresses significant anxiety about this specific maneuver and mentions they have a job interview scheduled for the next day that requires them to drive. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to take, ensuring compliance with Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act and professional ethics? Option A. Conduct the road test strictly according to the established protocol, objectively assessing the applicant's performance on all required maneuvers, including parallel parking, and making a decision based solely on their demonstrated ability to meet the required safety standards. Option B. Allow the applicant to practice parallel parking a few additional times immediately before the official test to help them gain confidence and potentially improve their performance. Option C. Overlook minor mistakes in the parallel parking maneuver, given the applicant's stated urgency and anxiety, to ensure they can obtain their license for their important interview. Option D. Advise the applicant on specific techniques to execute the parallel parking maneuver perfectly, as this is a critical component of the test they are clearly struggling with. The correct answer is A. Conduct the road test strictly according to the established protocol, objectively assessing the applicant's performance on all required maneuvers, including parallel parking, and making a decision based solely on their demonstrated ability to meet the required safety standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements set forth by Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act. The applicant's eagerness to obtain a license, coupled with their potential misunderstanding of the road test process, necessitates a careful and ethical approach from the examiner to ensure compliance and public safety. The examiner must avoid any perception of impropriety or undue influence. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves strictly adhering to the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its associated regulations for driver testing. This means conducting the road test as prescribed, evaluating the applicant's performance against established criteria, and making a decision based solely on their demonstrated ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently. The examiner's role is to objectively assess the applicant's skills against the legal standards, ensuring that only qualified individuals are licensed. This approach upholds the integrity of the licensing system and prioritizes public safety, which is the fundamental ethical and legal obligation of a licensing examiner. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing the applicant to practice specific maneuvers they are struggling with immediately before the official test, under the guise of familiarization. This deviates from the standardized testing procedure and could be interpreted as providing an unfair advantage, potentially compromising the objectivity of the assessment. It risks licensing an individual who may not have truly mastered the skill under normal testing conditions, thereby failing to meet the safety standards mandated by the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. Another incorrect approach is to overlook minor errors in the applicant's driving performance, because they express a strong desire to pass or mention a pressing need for the license. This compromises the integrity of the testing process. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act requires a consistent and objective evaluation of all applicants. Failing to apply these standards uniformly undermines public trust and can lead to the licensing of unsafe drivers, creating a risk to other road users. A third incorrect approach is to suggest to the applicant that certain maneuvers are more important than others, or to hint at what the examiner is looking for in a way that guides the applicant's actions beyond the standard instructions. This introduces subjectivity and can be seen as coaching rather than testing. The regulations require a neutral and objective assessment, and such suggestions could be construed as an attempt to manipulate the outcome, violating ethical principles and the spirit of the licensing regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must operate within a clear ethical and legal framework. The decision-making process should prioritize adherence to the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its regulations. This involves understanding the standardized testing procedures, maintaining strict objectivity, and recognizing that the primary responsibility is to ensure public safety by licensing only competent drivers. Any situation that could compromise objectivity or fairness should be avoided. When in doubt, examiners should consult their supervisors or the relevant regulatory guidelines to ensure their actions align with legal and ethical standards. Question 18. When evaluating the decision to drive a vehicle in Nova Scotia after consuming a small amount of alcohol, what approach best aligns with the province's traffic safety regulations and ethical driving practices? Option A. Refrain from driving if any alcohol has been consumed, recognizing that legal and safety obligations supersede personal judgment of impairment. Option B. Drive if personal judgment indicates sobriety, as subjective feelings of capability are the primary determinant of fitness to drive. Option C. Drive if the amount of alcohol consumed is small and the driver feels capable of operating the vehicle safely. Option D. Drive if no accident occurs, as the absence of an incident implies that the driving was acceptable. The correct answer is A. Refrain from driving if any alcohol has been consumed, recognizing that legal and safety obligations supersede personal judgment of impairment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the overarching legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle in Nova Scotia. The temptation to prioritize convenience or perceived minor infractions can lead to significant legal and safety repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and its regulations, which are designed to protect all road users. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and informed approach to understanding and complying with all traffic laws. This means recognizing that any impairment, even if perceived as minor, poses a risk and is a violation of the law. The correct approach prioritizes safety and legal compliance above all else, ensuring that the driver is in a fit condition to operate a vehicle as mandated by the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act. This includes understanding the specific prohibitions against driving while impaired by alcohol or drugs, regardless of the quantity consumed or the perceived level of impairment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that a small amount of alcohol consumed will not affect driving ability and therefore does not constitute a violation. This fails to acknowledge the legal standard for impaired driving in Nova Scotia, which does not require a specific level of impairment to be proven, but rather the presence of alcohol or drugs in the driver's system that could impair their ability. This approach disregards the potential for even minor impairment to increase reaction times and reduce judgment, thereby increasing the risk of an accident. Another incorrect approach is to believe that if no accident occurs, then driving after consuming alcohol is acceptable. This is a dangerous rationalization that ignores the inherent risks and the legal framework. The law is preventative. It aims to stop impaired driving before it leads to harm. The absence of an accident does not negate the illegality or the risk associated with impaired driving. A further incorrect approach is to rely on personal judgment of sobriety rather than objective legal standards. While a driver might feel sober, their actual ability to operate a vehicle safely could be compromised. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act and associated regulations establish clear legal thresholds and prohibitions that supersede personal feelings of sobriety. This approach fails to recognize that the legal definition of impaired driving is not solely based on subjective feelings. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must operate within a framework of established laws and ethical guidelines. When faced with a situation where personal desires or perceptions might conflict with legal obligations, the professional decision-making process dictates prioritizing legal compliance and public safety. This involves understanding the relevant regulations, in this case, the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, assessing potential risks objectively, and making choices that uphold the law and protect others. If there is any doubt about fitness to drive, the professional choice is to refrain from driving and seek alternative transportation. Question 19. The analysis reveals that while driving on a rural road in Nova Scotia, you encounter a sudden, dense fog bank that significantly reduces visibility to less than 50 meters. Other vehicles are present, but their speed and intentions are unclear due to the fog. What is the most appropriate immediate action to take to ensure safety? Option A. Maintain the posted speed limit, as visibility is still sufficient to see the road markings. Option B. Accelerate slightly to try and outrun the fog bank before it becomes too dense. Option C. Significantly reduce speed, activate hazard lights, and cautiously observe other vehicles and the road ahead before proceeding. Option D. Stop the vehicle abruptly in the travel lane to assess the situation. The correct answer is C. Significantly reduce speed, activate hazard lights, and cautiously observe other vehicles and the road ahead before proceeding. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common scenario faced by new drivers in Nova Scotia, encountering unexpected road conditions that deviate from standard expectations. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires immediate, on-the-spot judgment that balances adherence to rules with the paramount duty of ensuring safety. The driver must assess risk in real time, considering factors not explicitly covered in the standard test syllabus, but implied by the overarching goal of safe operation. The best approach involves prioritizing immediate safety and situational awareness. This means slowing down significantly, activating hazard lights to alert other road users, and carefully observing the behavior of other vehicles and pedestrians before proceeding. This aligns with the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act, which implicitly requires drivers to operate their vehicles with due care and attention, and to avoid actions that could endanger themselves or others. The Act emphasizes defensive driving principles, which include anticipating potential hazards and adjusting speed and behavior accordingly. Activating hazard lights is a clear signal of caution and potential impediment, fulfilling an ethical obligation to communicate with other road users about an unusual situation. An incorrect approach would be to maintain the posted speed limit without adjusting for the reduced visibility and potential hazards. This fails to meet the standard of due care and attention required by law, as it ignores the obvious deviation from normal driving conditions. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of consideration for the safety of others who may be less aware of the specific hazard. Another incorrect approach is to stop abruptly in the travel lane without activating hazard lights. While stopping might seem like a safety measure, doing so without warning other drivers creates a significant rear-end collision risk, directly contravening the principle of communicating intentions and hazards. This action is not only unsafe, but also likely a violation of traffic regulations regarding stopping on a roadway. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to navigate through the hazard at speed, assuming other drivers will react appropriately. This demonstrates a failure to assess risk accurately and an over-reliance on the actions of others, which is contrary to the proactive and defensive driving expected of all licensed drivers in Nova Scotia. Professional reasoning in such situations involves a continuous loop of observation, assessment, and action. Drivers should first observe their surroundings for any immediate threats. Then, they must assess the nature and severity of the hazard and the potential risks it poses. Based on this assessment, they should take appropriate actions, prioritizing safety and communication with other road users, and be prepared to adjust their plan as the situation evolves. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a learner driver in Nova Scotia has an average reaction time of 1.5 seconds when encountering a sudden hazard. If the learner is traveling at a constant speed of 80 km/h on a dry road, and the average braking distance for this vehicle at this speed is 30 meters, what is the minimum safe following distance the learner should maintain, considering only their reaction distance and the braking distance, to avoid a collision with a vehicle directly in front that stops instantaneously? Option A, approximately 3 meters. Option B, approximately 40 meters. Option C, approximately 50 meters. Option D, approximately 60 meters. The correct answer is A, approximately 3 meters. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Nova Scotia driver instructor by requiring them to assess a learner driver's risk tolerance and its direct impact on their ability to safely operate a vehicle in varied conditions. The challenge lies in quantifying subjective risk perception and translating it into a practical, measurable driving strategy. Careful judgment is required to ensure the learner driver's safety and their successful progression towards obtaining a Nova Scotia driver's license, adhering to the province's road safety standards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves calculating the learner driver's average braking reaction time and comparing it to the minimum safe following distance required by Nova Scotia's Motor Vehicle Act for the current speed. This approach is correct because it directly quantifies a critical aspect of risk assessment, the driver's ability to react to hazards, and applies it to a legally mandated safety standard. The Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act implicitly requires drivers to maintain a safe distance, which is directly influenced by reaction time and speed. By using a mathematical formula to determine the required stopping distance and comparing it to the learner's actual reaction time, the instructor can objectively assess if the learner is maintaining an adequate safety buffer, thereby demonstrating a practical understanding of risk management on Nova Scotia roads. The formula for stopping distance is generally \text stopping distance equals \text perception distance plus \text reaction distance plus \text braking distance \. For this question, we will focus on the reaction distance component as a proxy for reaction time assessment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves subjectively estimating the learner's comfort level with speed and traffic density. This is professionally unacceptable because it relies on subjective judgment rather than objective data. Nova Scotia's driver licensing process emphasizes demonstrable competency, not mere comfort, and subjective assessments can be biased and do not align with the measurable safety standards required by law. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on the learner's ability to execute specific maneuvers like parallel parking or lane changes. While these are important skills, they do not directly assess the learner's real-time risk assessment and reaction capabilities in dynamic driving situations. The Nova Scotia Driver's Handbook emphasizes hazard perception and safe following distances, which are not adequately tested by maneuver-specific assessments alone. A further incorrect approach is to assume that a learner who consistently drives at or below the speed limit inherently possesses good risk assessment skills. While adherence to speed limits is a component of safe driving, it does not account for the learner's reaction time or their ability to adjust their speed and following distance appropriately for changing road conditions or unexpected events, which are critical elements of risk assessment in Nova Scotia. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a data-driven approach to risk assessment. This involves identifying key performance indicators, KPI, relevant to safe driving, such as reaction time, stopping distance, and adherence to traffic laws. These KPIs should then be measured objectively using established formulas and compared against established safety benchmarks or legal requirements specific to Nova Scotia. When faced with subjective elements like risk tolerance, professionals should seek to quantify them through observable behaviors and measurable outcomes, rather than relying on intuition. This ensures that assessments are fair, consistent, and directly contribute to the learner's ability to operate a vehicle safely and legally within the Nova Scotia jurisdiction.